Good day and good evening, and welcome back to Walk and Talk with me, Caetsu Chaiji, but you can just call me Kai. As usual, we go for a walk around the place. Every so often we do a little pause to check out a clip that some of you have sent me. Whether it's to take a look at something that you did, or you want advice on your gameplay or whatever it is, or we just want to investigate something. And in the meantime, this is the perfect place if you have, say, a question for me or something you'd like to discuss with the community. It probably will be Nox, but it is in the list, and we don't have nearly as many clips as we had last time, I believe. So that's already also a good sign. But that's the plan. With that said, hey Liv, hey Kaj, hey Talima, hey Agent Monica, hey Tinley, hey Gazel, hey Saros, hey Lana, hey Ansa, hey Nox, and hey Toby. Hope you're all doing very well. So, we are where we left off last time, a random place in the middle of Heavensward Land. And I guess we'll just continue where we were going. We didn't quite reach the point that I was hoping for last time. As it turned out, it was pretty long, and we ended up stopping more frequently. And stopping for longer. So a really funny thing that I was made aware of this morning, or this afternoon, I guess, was someone checked out my non-standard Black Mage stuff video from a while back in 7.2, and they made me aware that there is a line that is relevant before you get Paradox that I hadn't considered because I just assumed it would be bad, so I didn't bother calculating it. But not only is it good, but it also is just as easy to incorporate into the rotation as the UI1B3 Swiftcast trick. And its presence makes the rotation even more flexible, and is actually so easy to incorporate that there's been many times where I've done synced down content as Black Mage, where I could have done it had I only known that it was a solid option. Hey Tomea and Phil, hope you're doing well. This is an Expedition 33. Well, I did say at the end of yesterday that it'll probably be Expedition 33 once a week. But this is a sort of expedition, isn't it? That Dragongear plays is random. So the line that I was made aware of is... So, hey Medusa, hope you're doing well. The classic that I've mentioned many a time, UI1B3 Swiftcast, is simply when you finish an Astral Fire state, if you can finish with an instant cast, or you can follow up with an instant cast after you've done what you need to get done, then you can transpose, weave Swiftcast, and then use Blizzard 3 for a very small damage gain. That's the classic. We use that one at max level too, because that's just a solid way to turn Swiftcast that is otherwise just a mobility tool into free damage. That's pretty good. How's 8 time packs? Hope you're doing well. Expedition 14. the much worse ending to that story, I guess. Now, the new trick that I hadn't considered, but in retrospect should have been obvious, is a F1, F3 Swiftcast, which is quite literally just the reverse. of the Umbral Ice one. And for those that are not really into Black Mage optimization, the reason why it's UI1 B3 Swiftcast is because you use Transpose from Astral Fire, putting you in Umbral Ice 1, UI1, and then you use Swiftcast, and then you use Blizzard 3, B3. When normally, like the normal simple version, you could call AF3 B3. You just cast Blizzard 3 from Astral Fire. Like that's like the OG. That's what you do if you're not in the business of optimizing, I guess. And similarly, in the levels where you don't have Paradox and you're not using Fire 1, well, rather in the levels where you don't use Paradox, the only way you're going to enter Astral Fire normally is UI 3 F3. So you just cast a cold Fire 3 or a hot Blizzard 3 in the opposite direction. And the reason you do that is because that means you can use 7 Fire 4s in sequence, and if you're below level 72, you can also use Flare, which is like in the infinite length fight in a vacuum. Using Flare to finish off every Astral Fire state on single target is technically a damage loss, like a mini baby small damage loss. It's technically a damage loss, but in practice, it really comes down to like a lot of things, like, well, when is the fight actually gonna end? Is there a raid buff that is gonna end after the Flare cast? Like, really, really minor stuff. So, for the most part, I usually count it. I usually include it. But, like, personally. Because it's such a small difference that when it is going to be a loss, it's so rare, in my opinion. If you instead... like from ice, again, you would need an instant cast, right? You would need an instant cast to do it. But hypothetically, if we just ignore that part for a second and just go, you have that instant cast after Blizzard 4. So you go Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, instant cast of some sort, transpose, and then instant cast Fire 3 without Firestarter. Then because you have Umbral Hearts, the Fire 3 is still gonna cost 2000 MP, not 4000, leaving you with 8000 MP. And 2 Umbral Hearts means that you will still be able to cast 6 Fire Force. Not 7, but 6. You will not be able to afford Flare, but you will get 6 Fire Force at level 72 and above. You will be able to get 5 Fire Force and a Despair, which, like 50 potency more, right? But that, of course, means that the normal way you would get 7 Fire Force and Despair, which, of course, itself produces a whole different conversation. But I've also calculated that one. For anyone curious, I've calculated all of them, specifically this afternoon, because I was made aware of this. So you done? Hope you're doing well. I'll get to your question in a bit, Tampax. Sacrificing that damage, like those casts of Fire 4 and or Flare, turns out to be a gain because you're replacing a really bad cold Fire 3 with, you know, a mildly warm Fire 3. And the Fire 4s are, well, they're good. You need more than that to compensate for that really garbage cold Fire 3, which turns out to make it a huge damage gain, relatively speaking, a very high damage gain in potency per second. But where it gets really interesting is in the level range of 66 to 89, where you have triple cast. Let's actually go into the mock home here. Where you have more, like you have triple cast. It isn't an uncommon situation that, because you don't have Paradox, that you will use triple cast at the end of the Astral Fire state. Essentially, all you wanted was a swift cast, but you didn't have that, so triple cast is what it'll have to be. You finish your Astral Fire state, then you go, I don't know, Thunder, Xenoglossy, whatever, and then you use triple cast. Transpose Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, and you don't have anything else you'd want to cast, you just cast Fire 3 there. If you cast the Cold Fire 3, you're preserving all of your Fire 4 casts and all that. But if you just transpose again and cast Fire 3 from there, apparently that's a gain because Swift casted Fire 3 with an Umbral Heart like that is a gain. So you can essentially get a 2-for-1 by triple casting, so you get to triple cast Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, and Fire 3. And this gets even crazier because the instant casted Fire 3, based on my calculations, is actually more valuable than the instant casted Blizzard 3. Which means if you were put in the position where you had to choose between swift casting the transposed Fire 3 and the transposed Blizzard 3, it would actually be better to do the swift casted Fire 3, despite it coming at the cost of losing a Fire 4 and a Flare, or an additional Fire 4 to fit the Despair. Because a Cold Fire 3 is just that bad compared to a lukewarm Fire 3, which I found really interesting, and that will definitely be something that I will use looking forward. So, to Tampak's question, have you ever used a one-time item restoration feature? I have not. I mistakenly sold a ring that came with a once Hero's Journey set I bought. Contacted GM, it seems they were not aware altogether rings came in a pair, and I was told to wait while they investigate. It's been 5 days. You could try and, like, respond to them. Like, be like, hey, you said that you would investigate. How's that coming along? But I have not used it. The reason why I have not used it is, well, first of all, I have not accidentally sold an item or gotten rid of an item that I regretted getting rid of, for better or worse. Second, even if I had done that, the one-time item restoration thing is a really weird thing, because when they say it's a one-time thing, they really mean it sometimes. Let me put it like this. The one-time item restoration, the first time you ask for it, they'll usually just give it to you. Just like, bam, there you go. But after the first time, some GMs will just say, nope, you already used it. Like, some will just say no. Some will also just always say yes. Like, some will just say yes anyways. But it means that once you've used your one guaranteed safe one, it becomes RNG whether you can get an item restored, which is a little weird. But it is also a way for them to make sure that someone wouldn't ask for an item restoration unless they really, really mean it. Also, thank you for celebrating 27 months as part of the Cult of the Pink, Matthew. Thank you so much. Fire! Also, Naomi, and Riley, and Matthew, hope you're all doing very well. And hey, Snow Shiro, hope you're doing well as well. And yeah, the one-time thing is probably there to dissuade people from asking for trivial things. I believe there's also something to be said that when you ask for the item to be restored to you, they just, like, they effectively just reproduce it. Like, they just make a new one for you, which kinda matters because hypothetically, let's say that an item was put into the game that vendored for like 1,000,000 gil. You sell it and then you ask for it to be restored to you. They don't take away your 1,000,000 gil, they just restore it to you. But if it wasn't a one-time thing, you could just be like, oh, whoops, I accidentally sold it again. Clumsy me. Yeah, whoop, my bad. Might be. I'll do it better next time. Can I have it back again? And then like they restore to you again because there isn't a one-time only policy, and you just like sit there producing millions of gil by reselling the same item. Hypothetically. Yeah, Riley says, as long as you haven't closed the support ticket on your end, you should be able to, like, they should still be able to see the previous messages. Is the highest item level I own? I would say you could probably get it replaced. Are you, like, is it from an MSQ reward, Tampax? Do you lose the crafting signature? I don't know, Matthew. Somebody says, would you consider a world event, like, for instance, the pre-release of Wrath of the Lich King event, doable or desirable in Final Fantasy XIV? Considering how players seem to react to true FOMO in Final Fantasy XIV, I have a strong feeling that would not be super well received. For those that are not in the loop on that one, World of Warcraft has in the past had some, like, lead-up events to a new expansion drop where some special items and special things would happen. Like, imagine if leading up to Endwalker, like, as some of you may remember, in Shadowbringers, like, we finish off with a rather ominous situation. And then nothing happens until Endwalker releases. Imagine if for like a few months leading up to Endwalker, something started happening. Like I don't know, fates spawning in various locations for high-level players to deal with this breakout as a result of the lead up to the Endwalker story. And these fates and event NPCs that would be associated with them gave you access to maybe some specific items, maybe some glam or something. Just like something small to like tide you over until the expansion release. The problem that would probably arise from such an event would be that these items would likely not be available if you missed the event. This can of course be solved very easily by, I don't know, adding it to the store, or adding the items as available through other means. So it wouldn't be that bad. But now, Tomer did specifically suggest an example in the Wrath of the Lich King pre-event, and that's important. I'll get to that in a moment. Hey, Dan! And hey, Zarf and friends, hope you're doing well. We're having a little bit of a talk about FOMO, you could say. And hey, Rakar, hope you're doing well as well. And I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much. I have heard some people that have been really getting a lot of value out of the AI Extreme guides. I had a feeling when I released it that it would be super helpful for just the right person, but there might not be that many of them. But I have heard that it has been a lot of value for those select players. And hey, Kat, hope you're doing well as well. And yeah, indeed, there is something close to that with the PvP seasons. However, the PvP seasons were actually introduced in this, like, specifically for the Endwalker style seasons, or series specifically, with the added aside that these items will eventually be re-added to the game. So, and yeah, you could put them on the bicolor vendors, for instance. Also, Sally, hope you're doing well. And the reason why the pre-Wrath of the Lich King example is really, really scary, is a scary example, is because the pre-release Wrath of the Lich King event from World of Warcraft came with one specific item that never again was obtainable. It didn't do anything. Like, not really. But it had value because it was no longer obtainable. I think it's called the Haunted Memento or something like that. If you carry it, then other players may see a shade of Naxxramas, untargetable, but existing, stalking you. That's all it does. It doesn't do anything, it's just a visual effect for carrying this item. Which of course means that this item is, like, extremely valuable, because you can't get it anymore. But again, as suggested, it could be. Like, in the context of Final Fantasy XIV, they could just add it somewhere if they had such an event. And I do agree with Kat that a special event themed around the upcoming expansion to tide players over for like a month or two leading up to the next expansion definitely wouldn't be hated. Even if it's just something small. I'm just saying, the Mark Tome event, like, it works, question mark, has been in the game for years and is essentially the, okay, well, playtime's over, you've probably kind of done everything that there is to do in this patch, so here's this. I have something to do. But more and more players have everything, quote-unquote, to the degree that most of the time, for a lot of players, the Mark Tome event comes and there's, like, the unique earring from the particular event to get that you won't use, but gotta have it, because what if you wanted to have it and then you didn't get it? And everything else, you already have it. You already have it. Like, I've bought basically every single one of those earrings, but let's just say that I don't ever use earrings. Ever. Apparently the Kavi earring is very popular. I also got that one. I was like, it's on too. Hope you're doing well. Naomi says, I just skip out on those earrings because I do not see myself using them ever. The thing that really makes it weird for me is also that they're usually one earring, and there's something that really weirds me out about the asymmetry of having one earring. I'd much rather just not have an earring or have two. That's really what it comes down to. I'll say, hey, Gamora, hope you're doing well. But I think such an event could work. I have a feeling, though, that what would happen is it would very quickly be criticized for not being very much. And I'm just speaking from experience here, that it feels like that's what would happen. Either it would be, you know, like one of the seasonal events where you talk with a guy 3 times and then they give you a thing. Or it has some fate stuff and then people would be annoyed that they have to wait for the fates to spawn. Or they would be annoyed that that's all there is to it. Like, I'm just saying that my experience with events in Final Fantasy XIV tells me that the average player experience wouldn't appreciate it. Jose Yostek, hope you're doing well. Some players might also say that it's wasting resources that could have been spent elsewhere. And whether that's actually true is a completely separate conversation. It's just, in this case, it's about player perception. Also, Yannick, hope you're doing well as well. Akao says, I think it was the Dragon Quest collab that had fates you had to do. The Final Fantasy 15 one also did. Actually, I believe in the past it was pretty common for events to have, like, a fate you had to do. And while you might say that's really annoying because you could sit there for ages waiting for it to spawn, most of the time they spawned quite frequently. So you had to wait, like, oh, maybe 5 minutes. But yeah, almost every time I do feel like I remember some people would be, you know, groaning at, there's an event quest that, like, there's a fate I need to wait for to spawn. And yeah, the unfortunate reality is that complaining about having to do basically anything to get the seasonal reward eventually results in either the devs go, okay, then too bad for you, or they go, oh, the players don't like having to do stuff to earn this item. It's also possible that the real reason why these event quests, or rather these events, just have less and less to do is because the devs went, you know what, that is a good point. Why are we wasting dev resources on making these elaborate seasonal things that are just there for a few weeks? Why don't we use this energy on something that will actually stay? But then, like, I mean, I'm just saying that if we take that kind of logic to its to its logical extreme, it quickly becomes, so why are we wasting energy on making like a 3-step quest where you just have to talk with someone a few times? Why don't you just, why isn't it just, oh, an event is active, you log in, you have a new emote? And I'm not saying that as something that I would want. I'm mostly saying that as a, I mean, if we're going to lament that there's being wasted developer resources on this seasonal thing, and so better just make it, like, water it down and really bland, why are we making anything? Like why bother at all? Those 3 dialogue quests could be what they test the writer interns with. That's a good point, Ham. That could be. That's awesome, Riley, and congratulations. Thank you so much. That could be, Ham, that it's like how they test. It could also, it's also possible, while we're on the topic of like work distribution, it is a possibility that these seasonal event quests is something that the writing team just quickly smashes out on the side. Like the devs are working on programming all the new stuff for the story, and they're fully backed up. But the writing team is just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, so they could quickly smash out a few event quests, no problem. And making a few dialogue options like that is something that, I don't know, maybe an intern dev could like smash out, or maybe like just a dev could do in like 5 minutes or something, like just, you know, quickly done. So it, like, while you could argue that this is wasting precious developer time, it's like this gives all the players like maybe a good 30 minutes to an hour of entertainment, and it does like advertise the game a bit that, ooh, there's a new event going on, come on back to the game and play it for a little bit. Like, no, buy a month of subscription, come on down. And it costs time from people that have time to spare, primarily. And this is something that came up a little bit with this kind of work distribution I was made a little bit more aware of, more effectively aware of in the context of Fellowship somewhat recently. I was like, Nicholas, hope you're doing well. When Fellowship released, which is early access release a few months ago, they had a huge amount of like problems they needed to fix, which meant that the dev team, like the programmer side of things, were completely blocked from doing anything else. But like, who knows how much truth there is to it, but they said when Halloween came around, they had like a whole event with like the main hub was completely revamped for Halloween, and there were skins for every character to unlock and stuff. It was just like essentially a quote-unquote small thing, but their explanation was the programmers were fully backed up, but because the programmers were busy doing essentially server interaction stuff that has no visual elements whatsoever, the graphics side of things, you know, the art team, had nothing to do. So they could quickly smash out some Halloween skins and an overhaul for the base, and all the developer, like all the programmers had to do was just, you know, connect A to B once it was finished. So sometimes that can be the explanation. That, oh, well, the ones that would actually be, quote-unquote, wasting precious time on an event don't really get involved, and those that are actually spending time on the event had the time to give in the first place. And yeah, exactly, as Zav says, the events are very, very similar. It's very possible that they can just copy-paste a previous event, and they just need to change the coordinates of where the NPC spawns, and maybe what emote you have to use on them, and where you have to go. And yeah, it's also possible that that Halloween event for Fellowship had already been done before the release. Like, that's also a possibility. But based on what they said, they essentially suggested that all that was done while the programmers were working on something else. And yeah, it is funny. I could imagine that, well, actually, funny question, if Final Fantasy XIV subscription gave a Final Fantasy XI subscription just free at the same time, would there be any reason to subscribe to Final Fantasy XI instead, directly? I'm guessing the Final Fantasy XI subscription is cheaper? Now, on a different note, since we've been hanging here for a little bit, I have a bunch of clips as usual. The clips I have for today that you all have sent me, I have a clip from Gazel doing Tsukuyomi Unreal as Dark Knight. Looking for some advice on what they could do better, maybe. I have a clip from Shaq featuring like an alternative POV of something funny that happened in our M9S last week. I have a clip from Agent Monica clearing a difficult fight with Blue Mage. I have both the Milo, so healer, and Shaq melee DPS POVs of our M9S clear, but I did something fancy and combined their clears with my own so that we can see 3 POVs simultaneously, which I thought would be a very interesting insight in how different a fight can work from different perspectives at the same time. I've been told by Milo that he's fine with us checking it out when he's not here. But we will probably make sure that Shaq is here at least. Because he's usually available later. The funny thing is that the hardest part of smashing that together was that the slightly higher quality clip from Milo came in a file format that wasn't interpretable by my editing software, and I tried using various tools to convert it to different things, and it just didn't work. So we ended up with a slightly blurrier clip, but I imagine you can't tell the difference. And finally, I have a clip from Nox. Some of you may remember a while back, Nox shared a clip of Hades 2. And he has gone out of his way to make a little bit more of that. So we can... For those that enjoy Hades 2, they might find it fascinating to see some people that don't know very much about Hades see a little bit more of it. And we will probably finish with that clip. Because I do know that there's also some that don't care. And they can then, you know, just quietly leave when they're like, oh, now he's doing the Hades 2 thing. It's totally fair. Also, hey, Daenerys. Hope you're doing well. The Final Fantasy XI subscription is cheaper. Yeah, that would justify it. The main reason why I think it would make sense to just have the 14 subscription come with an 11 subscription is, like, that's how World of Warcraft does it. That doesn't mean that 14 has... that Final Fantasy has to do that, but that is how WoW does it. That the Classic comes packaged with retail. And the reason why that would be smart is that this could both mean that 11 players would be like that have never tried 14 might be like, oh, I could pay like just slightly more and then I get a whole additional MMO that I can also play. Might make them more likely to try 14. And the 14 players might try 11, and if they get tired of 14, they might just... Like, hypothetically, they could, you know, switch to an 11 subscription only to save a bit of money, but they might also just keep the one subscription they have running, because then they can play 14 when they like, but they will continue playing 11. Like, to make it so that both games can, like, help each other keep retention. So it could be worth it. But there's something that is really awkward with 11 is, as I understand, it's super deeply ingrained that 11 is just super, super awkward to install. Is 11 also available on console, though? I don't know. I don't remember. They could also do a combined one, that's true, Tamir. Not anymore. Oh. Yeah, but yeah, I would probably... See, the thing is, I would probably try 11. The problem for me in terms of 11 is more so that I've been told that getting Final Fantasy 11 to run is harder than some Savage bosses. And that's not the best sales pitch you could make. It's easier, but still not great. Oh man. Snowshoe says, people say they struggle with 14. I didn't think it was too bad. Me personally, I'm just saying, I don't know what happened with 14, because let's just say that it was easy enough for me to buy and set up a subscription for 14 that I bought the game the day after I tried the free trial, because back then you couldn't be a lizard person unless you bought the game. I'm like, well, I want to be that. And if the purchase process was super convoluted and awkward, I would probably have had second thoughts Say Red Master, hope you're doing well. Yannick says, when buying Dawntrail, the first time I opened the website, there was no Poland on the scroll menu. That would do it. That would indeed do it. When I wanted to buy Dawntrail, yeah, I was about to say, Snowshiro, amazingly, Squeenix websites look like they 25 years ago made a website and went perfect and just never changed it. And when I wanted to buy Dawntrail, I believe like pre-purchase was enabled. I waited a whole week because I was like, the website is going to be completely dumpstered by people trying to buy for at least a few days. A week later, the website was still so busted that I couldn't log in. As in, I would open the site, it would fail to connect. I would open the site, it would eventually connect. I would click log in, it would fail to reach the login page. I would refresh a bunch of times, eventually it would show. I would log in, it would say, you're logged in. I would move one page, I was no longer logged in. And so on and so forth. It was a battle to get it to work. When I finally got my key, it was also a nightmare to get it to work. Because just logging into the page where it would show the key was difficult. I'm assuming that you're saying 12 euros per 30 days, Ilana. Because I sure hope it isn't 12 euros for 3 days. The most expensive MMO of all time. Imagine for a moment, if you will, an MMO that had a subscription model like that. FF11 is like 2 euros more expensive than the 14 entry sub. That is interesting. But that would also explain why whenever there's been a new Alliance raid added in 14 regarding Final Fantasy XI, they add like 1 month of free Final Fantasy XI to be had. What's the maximum amount of money you can spend on 14 on one character? I mean, technically, Fantasias mean that the upper limit is infinite. But if it's per month, you mean, then I believe it's 8 more retainers. 8 or 9 more retainers, yeah. I think you can also have a premium version of the app or something like that. That gives you a little bit extra stuff. Now, in regards to the clips, wow, that looks funny. How about we start with Gazel's Tsukuyomi clip? Which as usual does not have any sound, by the way. So, Gazel is playing Dark Knight and specifically asked if they were using Dark Mind and TBN enough, I believe. So there's a little bit of defensive cooldown questioning here. As an that is a solid way to pull. Is that right? I feel like the recommended way to do your Living Shadow is to send it on GCD1, like after Unmend, because Living Shadow takes like 30 years to spawn. But I might remember that wrong. I do recall you mentioned that on JP, the main tank doesn't join the stack. Want to do it after your first Heart Slash, right? Then I think Living Shadow was still a little slow, but it's a small difference. It's a small difference. It was just something that stood out to me. That I don't believe you use it at the start of your burst, but that's like a really small thing. Just in the opening bit here, for the most part, there isn't that much you can do. Something, like if I'm going to be like super pedantic here, like a super optimized detail here, is if we rewind to the very start of your burst here. About using TPN pre-pull for that extra region tick. Yeah, the problem there is you don't want to do that unless you know for certain that it would break. So something here, in retrospect, is here you weaved Delirium and nothing else. I do see that raid buffs are not quite up yet, but you will see what I mean when we like fast forward back to like 1 minute later. Based on what I can see here, you might actually want to send Carve and Spit now. Or alternatively now. Alternatively now. Or even now. Or yet. Basically what I'm getting at is if you moved Carve and Spit 1 GCD earlier, just 1, you would actually have been able to fit it. Before she transitioned. But as I said, that's like a really, really small detail. Like, who knows? Like, you start this at intermission, you'll probably use Abyssal Drain and it'll be good. But it is something where, like, out of all your cooldowns here, that was the one that really didn't make it because it was prioritized lower. Like, specifically because it was prioritized lower. And that is a good point Rakar mentioned, that just using Dark Mind for auto attacks is pretty solid because Tsukuyomi's auto attacks are magic. And it'll come up very frequently. So just slamming it every time the boss is just swinging at you is pretty solid. Well, let's just say that in the times where it does pop, it gives you like it can give you a potential 600 MP. The important bit to keep in mind it does too. Because if you use TBN and then you enter combat, the first tick you'll get after Edge will be 200 MP. Only if you align the pull timer with MP ticks. True. That is true that there can be times where it didn't actually accomplish anything. But considering that TBN is somewhat often used like 2 seconds before pull, the probability that you won't hit that MP tick is relatively low. But I think, just to pause here a second for this sidetrack, I think the important thing to keep in mind, I feel like, Ham, you're exaggerating a little bit on your end how useless it is. However, there is something to be said that a lot of Dark Knights might get caught up in the fact that it is technically the most optimal to open with a pre-pull TBN, having it break, and then you get like maybe an additional MP tick. Ooh, maybe a 1.5. Like, who knows? You get like a little extra MP. But at best, you're getting something in the ballpark of like a fifth of an edge. Which is, what? Like 80 potency? 90 potency? Something like that? And if at any point in the fight you, whether deliberately or accidentally, find yourself at max MP and an MP tick occurs, then you very quickly lose that edge anyway. And why this matters at all also is if that initial TBN does not break, sure, it probably blocked some damage. Then that blocked damage is unlikely to have mattered in the grand scheme of things. If you're main tanking, you probably are receiving some heals from an EOS or from Cardia or something, and they'll probably make up the difference. The boss will auto-attack you once or twice, then they'll cast a raid wide, and then they'll cast a tank buster or something like that. And if they do tank buster first, you might actually prefer to have TBN available. And if we just focus, if we take it for a moment, assume that it's more of like an average case situation, at best, you're gaining like 600 MP. At worst, you're losing 2,400 MP. So you're risking a 4/5 of an edge for 1/5 of an edge. Hey Galaxy, hope you're doing well. And hey Alejandro, hope you're doing well as well. So this is where it kind of gets complicated. And yeah, in regards to optimizing Dark Knight in general, to your question answer, if you are in a party where there are raid buffs, then you should be using Edge or Flood to make sure that your damage buff stays active. But aside, and also make sure you don't overcap on MP. But once that is over and done, holding MP and then like sending it in bursts whenever you're benefiting from an additional damage buff of some sort is like that's big ups. That's something you want. It's actually the same with Shadowbringer, that if it's not sitting on 2 charges, you could just like, and I'm talking about casual content, because in a Savage raid or an Unreal or something, there will probably be a lot more structure in where and when the raid buffs are going out, so you can kind of predict it. But in a casual context, you can't be sure. It could be in a dungeon, it could be in a normal trial or something. You can't be sure. But what you can do is your MP is flexible. You can hold several edges just in the chamber to use whenever. And Shadowbringer, you can hold one for when you get a buff. And then when you get a buff, you just go blam and use whatever you have. And if there's multiple buffs, you can, hold a Shadowbringer until the very last moment of that buff, just on the off chance that there's 2. But that would be what you can do if there's no raid buffs to be seen in your party. Incidentally, this party composition is exactly that. There's no raid buffs here. then you can typically just send it. The only time you'd hold it is if you have a burst potion that you're going to use. That's pretty funny. That does mean that as long as Gysahl keeps enough MP for a TBN, it doesn't actually matter when the edges are being used. But yeah, that is something that, like, there's something to be said about that, as Ham said, that sometimes we, the players in general... Ooh, I think you're dead. Never mind, you made it. Whew. That players can get a little too caught up in the whole optimization to the point where they might forget what the difference is between when you do the optimal thing perfectly and when you don't. And there we have the stack again, where the main tank just stays put. That was a pretty solid position, and that might have been, like, I will say, this position for the stack makes a lot better sense than, I guess, what my team has done. Because, I find it a little scary to stack in here, like, right into the big side. Because some players might already have a stack or two from that one and not feel super inclined to stand there. But if you have the stack take place on the line, everyone can stand in the stack and just lean left or right, depending on what they want. But I will also say that I don't see any, like, the main justification for why the main tank doesn't join the stack is, of course, that the stack does little enough damage that one player less isn't going to, like, break anything. But I would personally probably... Oh, I think one of the healers is dead. I would personally probably prefer to join just out of principle. Which hairstyle do you use on your character? One of the basic long hairstyles. I don't know what it is called, but it is not one that is unlocked through any means. It is a standard one. Alright, Telema, enjoy your evening. I would say... It's a little hard to say whether you're using Dark Mind and TBN enough, but I do see that you're using TBN for things that are not tank busters, which is a good start. Uh-oh. MP overcap. Ooh, I think you lost 200 MP there. Yeah, the Dark Mind, I would say sometimes I will do this thing. That was a funny GCD clip, but sometimes it can be like that when a tank buster sneaks up on you. Sometimes if I see the boss casting something and I don't remember what it does, if it sounds threatening enough, I'll just use a cooldown. Just in case. And using Dark Mind for that is not too bad. Something that I would mention, though... Now, I haven't been paying attention to it for the fight so far. Might help if we take a look back afterwards. Just a quick speed run of the whole duty to see. But a thing that I'm wondering about is Oblation getting used? Like, at all? And yeah, something you can also do to get more value out of TBN is to just send TBN on a random party member that has less HP than you for raid wipes. They will be more likely to have theirs break. There's something to be said that if it will require the same amount of AoE healing to recover anyway, then the only value you get there is that you trade 3000 MP for a Dark Arts sticker. Which is not a bad trade, but it might not do as much as you'd hope. Out of melee range disesteem, that's also very good. Something that we sometimes forget is when you have an attack that has a little bit of range. Let's see, Lana says on my part, what I don't understand is why bring to the tank side by default if the meteor have not been misplaced, because it means that when you bring her back to the middle, you then have to make a half turn. If we're going to the DPS meteor, you could then you come back to the middle and that's it. That's an interesting question. My guess is that if Tsukuyomi is placed the way that she should be, then there's a likelihood that DPS and potentially healers will be closer to the tank meteor when you have to start moving. By like a really small margin. Like it's something where it's like, no, that's not gonna matter. But it could matter. But yeah, given the amount of times the boss hits you with anything here, you could probably, like every time the boss starts swinging at you, just go, oh, I'm gonna use Ablation. And then the next time she starts swinging at you, oh, I'll use Dark Mind. And just back and forth. Like defensive cooldown cycling of the small stuff. At basically no cost. Because you won't need them. You'll probably have Shadowed Vigil. Or Rampart. Or both. When she tank busters you in particular. Jose, Buvamet, and Poco, hope you're doing well. And hey, Annabelle, hope you're doing well as well. And that's true, if you were to use TBN on something, putting it on whoever has the least HP, for instance a caster, is typically not a bad move. But there is something funny because in this particular party composition, unless you're using like a 6-minute pot or something, there isn't really any reason to worry about like stockpiling MP for bursts, which means that the potential value in having some of your MP stored in a Dark Arts sticker is kind of whatever. Naomi says, I do have to say though, pre-Wind's reply, Riddle of Wind feels like such a nothing button. Yeah, right? Indeed. I think this went really well, by the way, Gazel. I think this went really well. I think you could probably have used Ablation a lot more. But I do think Zaf also has a pretty fair counterpoint that Tsukuyomi doesn't do that much to the tanks. So, you taking slightly less damage, I don't think anyone's gonna notice. But yeah, just generally, Ablation is something that is easily forgotten. And I also speak from experience there that I will also be like, oh, right, Ablation is a button that exists after the fight is over. I think it went well. Whoop, and whoop. Now, I will be right back, and then we'll probably continue the walk a little bit. In the meantime, sanity restored. Alright, I'm back. Hi, Randy. The Shackman. And Daryl. Hope you're doing well. That's right, Gazel. Riddle of Wind for monks. Effect is that it cuts the time between your auto attacks in half. Which is, like, practically speaking, I mean, it adds damage. Monk's auto attack damage is nothing to be, like, nothing to sneeze at. It's a significant amount of your DPS. It's just that, how do I put this? Imagine if Scholar had an ability that said embrace heals for 50% more for the next 20 seconds. The funny thing is they used to basically have that. Rouse used to boost the output of your pet by 40%, and I do believe Scholars had that one too. It would be like Soteria, yeah. The difference is that it would boost a passive thing that you have no control over whatsoever. Not that Cardi is like, it's super in control. But it at least feels like you're boosting something that you are controlling and using. And Riddle of Wind is kind of like that. You have no control over it. You're just auto-attacking. You can control who you're auto-attacking. But the only way you can do something actually smart, quote-unquote, with it is maybe if you're keeping close track of your auto-attack timer, then maybe you can use Riddle of Wind in just the right timing such that you can fit an extra auto-attack inside Riddle of Fire or something that you might not be able to otherwise. I don't even know. I'm not even sure. But essentially, Riddle of Wind is like a dot on a 90-second cooldown, which is it doesn't feel like much. I was like, hey, Symmetricon, hope you're doing well. And that just doesn't feel that amazing. Not that the old Riddle of Wind was super great. The old Riddle of Wind was associated with back when Monk had elemental shoulder tackles. Riddle of Wind, I believe, had to do with wind being 2 tackles or something like that. Something weird like that. Which is probably more lame than you auto-attack faster. Still funny to me that the fairy doesn't benefit from illumination. It is one of the weirdest interactions in the game. You could deal elemental damage to your party members back then? What? No? What? Huh? What does shoulder tackles have to do with friendly fire? Back in Stormblood, originally Monk had a gap closer called Shoulder Tackle, which was eventually replaced with Thunderclap. Shoulder Tackle essentially just gap closed and did some damage. I believe in Stormblood, they then added an interaction where your Shoulder Tackle changed effect based on which elemental fists you had. If you had fire fists, then you did a fire tackle, which did slightly more damage. If you were in earth fists, the fist of stone, I think, fist of earth, I believe it was a knockback, like it had a knockback effect. And if you were in fists of wind, using wind tackle gave turned it into riddle of wind or something like that, which then could be used again. Something like that. With the weird caveat being that fire tackle did just as much damage as 2 wind tackles, so it wasn't like, oh, but if you go into wind, because then you then remember that in Stormblood, Fist of Fire was the one that made you do the most damage. Riddles back then were a lot more complicated, because Riddle of Earth required that you it switched you to Fists of Earth to use, and it was some sort of mitigation. And Riddle of Fire, of course, also switched you to Fists of Fire when used. But what made it really weird is that that Riddle of Fire, it increased your damage by like 30%. But it also made your GCD normal. Like, it slowed your GCD, so like you had a GCD of like 2.5 during Riddle of Fire. Take an extra dash charge over decreased auto attack times. Well, I mean, the decreased auto attack times was damage gain, right? And the extra dash was just a worse gain, because remember, Naomi, what happens if you put damage on a gap closer? Ah, that gap close you got there? No, that's a damage button. And that gives damage button to me. I smell damage button. You're like, no, it's a gap closer. Gap closer. Hey, Boblo, hope you're doing well. Exactly, precisely. Ah, well, it has damage on it. I'm talking in the context of current monk. That's fair, but then that would be a nerf. Do you want that? But yeah, the fists stuff from Monk used to be a lot weirder. And then in Shadowbringers, I believe they took away the elemental tackle, so we were back to just regular shoulder tackle. And then they gave you I believe they just took out Riddle of Wind, like you just didn't have a Riddle of Wind. Riddle of Fire was changed to not reduce your GCD. Riddle of Earth and Riddle of Fire no longer required that you wear the appropriate fists to use. And and then they added a trait that made it so that Fists of Wind allowed you to have 4 stacks of Greased Lightning, which was better than using Fist of Fire. So your opener was like, Fist of Fire, get 3 Greased Lightning stacks, switch to Wind, and then get the 4th, and then just don't switch ever. Yannick says, can I add a short clip to the queue for the sake of general chat conversation? I usually only take clips. I take the clips at the start of the stream, so I've had a chance to glance over and know what I'm dealing with. So I give each clip the sufficient time it deserves. So I don't think I can do anything with it. I feel it would also be unfair because there's also other clips that I've denied for the same reason. So you can add a clip, but I probably won't check it until on next time. How's Iridian? Hope you're doing well. Rian says, a part of me wishes that I could have reached endgame during Stormblood or Heavensward just to experience the jank job design. That is a good point. That is a pretty good point. That, That is something that sometimes can be difficult to really understand how weird it was. But a lot of the time, a lot of the jank was either options that were just weirdly implemented, or options where it didn't really matter, or options where something was overlooked. Like a really funny one, in my opinion, is how Red Mage in Stormblood didn't have a slow AoE spell. They just had Scatter, which was a fast spell. So they just spammed Scatter for AoE, just... And then when they had generated a ton of mana, they just used Moulinet like 4 to 5 times in a row. Which didn't result in any magic burst at the end. That wasn't until... Endwalker? Because most of the jank comes from how too smooth the game is now. Yeah, exactly. It's like in Stormblood and Heavensward, a lot of the mega jank we think about is just relative to how clean the game is now. What might be considered relatively normal weirdness in Stormblood is super jank by today's standards. Like supreme jank by today's standards. And there's also some cases where it's just like smaller things where you're like, why would they ever do that? That then just stuck around for weirdly long. There's also some jobs where it could be argued that they still have the A Realm Reborn or Heavensward or even Stormblood jank. Cat says, in a few years we will call Summoner super jank because it doesn't really work with 2.5's GCD. Possibly. I think a really good example of that is in... I believe Cole suggested this one to me first, which is probably true. Is right now, with the release of Dawntrail, so EX6, right? It was released with a statement that came a little bit like out of left field of, we have taken a look at totem drops. We've kind of observed that it is a little badly balanced. Because when a fight, like, I can't remember how much of this is paraphrasing and how much of this is actually like in the statement, but essentially, if you have a kinda short fight, then it makes sense for it to only give one totem. Like, if you can easily do 2 of that fight in the time that a different one you would need, like, you only have enough time for 1, then it makes sense that the shorter one gives 1 totem and the longer one gives 2 totems. But, generally speaking, extremes, the short extremes are leaning a lot more heavily towards taking, like being close to deserving only 1 totem, or rather being very close to deserving 2 totems. And the small 2 totem fights, the ones where they're kind of short but they're giving 2 totems, they should maybe only give 1. The thing is that if a fight is long enough that it maybe should give 2 totems, then it absolutely shouldn't give 1 totem. While on the other hand, if a fight is maybe a little too short and maybe should give 1 totem, it still leans more towards just let it give 2 totems, because it's gonna suck if it gives just 1. It's gonna feel too long. It's gonna overstay its welcome. A clear comparison to this is Zelania versus any extreme in Dawntrail other than the first 2. Because Zelania was just long enough that it felt a little bit bad that she only gives 1 at a time. On the other hand, I believe it could be argued that Dawntrail is on the shorter end enough that 2 totems feel a little bit much, but 1 would be way too little. So my interpretation is that maybe for the next extreme, or maybe even the next expansion, they might review totems and be like, actually, you need 990 totems to get the mount. However, extremes drop somewhere between 10 and 20 totems. Or even 1 and 20 totems. So that if you have a really short fight, they can be like, yeah, you get like a half a totem based on the old standard. And if they have a long one, they could even give you like 25 totems or something. Like, so that they can more easily micromanage how many totems you're deserving of, instead of it being 1 or 2. The point that then Cole came up with is, if hypothetically they just changed it and said, actually, the mount costs 50 totems now. Like, that's just the new gold standard. Then players that thought that 99 totems was too much, but 50 would be just right. You give it a few years, and now 50 is too much. And 25, now that's where it's at. You move it to 25, and that would be nice for a time, and you can just keep moving it, because each time it'll just get closer and closer, and at some point people will be like, why isn't the mount just a guaranteed drop at this point? Like, what are we doing? What's with this song and dance? Why do we have to farm it? And there have been people that brought that up in the first place. And this is the same with many other things. Like, for instance, job design, that it has some sort of jank. People would like to get rid of that. They get rid of that. That just means that there's this other jank that appears that now would be nice to get rid of. And the only ones that don't ask are likely to be like, no, that's the good part. That's the thing that makes it fun. Hello? Also, I did notice that Ham says, how about Riddle of Wind gets a rework to give Monk the pool noodle treatment Red Mage got? For those that are out of the loop on that one, 7.4 made it so that Red Mage's Monification makes your single target melee combo have range. Just imagine your rapier just goes whoop and just becomes like super long, just like a noodle, just so that you can hit anyways. Why do we even have to play the game? Just give mount after normal. Yeah, right? Exactly, Cat. Why do we even have to do stuff? Why can't we just, when a patch drops, why can't we just have a vendor? Actually, why do we have inventories? Why can't we just have like a menu where we can just like grab things out of to use as we want? I was like, hey, Rost. Hope you're doing well. Also, let's see, Symmetricon says Radiant Aegis is still Mega Jank. I understand that there was a very, very, very short period in Dawntrail where there was a piece of jank with Radiant Aegis. It came from a point of trying to help. But people almost instantly found a way to use it for evil, quote unquote. The trick was, just to explain, the concept known as ghosting is when you order your pet to do something and then the pet disappears before it can do it. You don't get a refund. It's just, well, didn't get to do it. I can't remember, like, I haven't really ran into this problem. I don't play Summoner or Scholar enough for that to be a common problem for me. But I do recall that there was a change where they tried to... Are we back? Let's see, where did I get interrupted? Ghosting. Oh, I know Asymmetricon. I was kind of getting to that. I guess. If you use an action, you order your pet to do something, and the pet just disappears before it can do it, then you usually don't get a refund. It's just, well, too bad. You should have thought about that before you sent your pet away. But in Dawntrail, they tried to alleviate that by making it so that if your pet disappeared within a short time frame after being ordered to do something, they refunded the cooldown. This works nicely with, for instance, if you ask Eos to use Whispering Dawn, but then you use Dissipation or Summon Seraph, and now Eos is gone. They can just refund you Whispering Dawn's cooldown and it'll be all good. The problem was with Summoner, because they had a little small oversight that when they refunded Radiant Aegis, they just maxed it out. So if you could use Radiant Aegis and then use Radiant Aegis again right as you were replacing Kabi, which would then make the game go, oh, Kabi didn't get to use Radiant Aegis, let's refund that, and now you have 2 stacks again. And, like, it's a very niche thing you could do, and I do believe it was fixed. I can't be bothered to test it right here. But that was a thing. A little bit of jank. Asymmetricon has an interesting point that something really weird with Summoner planning is that you can't use Radiant Aegis if Kabi is not on the field. Which means that every time you summon something, you're, blocked from using Radiant Aegis for a while. When you summon Bahamut or Phoenix, you're blocked from using Radiant Aegis for like 16 seconds. When you summon Ifrit, Titan, or Garuda, you're blocked from using Radiant Aegis for like 6 seconds or so. I would say that that's not necessarily jank. I imagine that it is deliberate design, that they have considered the weirdness of this. That's the reason why Radiant Aegis lasts 30 seconds. Because it means you can use Radiant Aegis way in advance if the particular point where you actually need the barrier happens to overlap with a point where Kabi is not on the field. But it does feel weird that you need Kabi on the field, and Kabi, like, comes and goes like a swinging door all the time. Like, it's really funny how that plays out. And as Asymmetricon puts it, the difference between jank and mechanics is pretty subjective. Yes, and I think that's also why a lot of the jank of the olden days have been removed, because some players see it as jank, and then the masters are like, no, that's what made it fun, hello? Also, Isaac Boy, and Ilya, hope you're doing well. Gazel says, I've grown the habit of only sending the pet away at least one GCD later, so can't really tell. I also do that. Like, I've always just played around this stuff. So for me, it's just, I only was aware of this Radiant Aegis jank because, avenue of me making Mythbuster videos and whatnot. And also the fact that when some of you may remember early in Dawntrail, both Summoner and Scholar had a trait that buffed the potency of their pets' actions that was bugged. By bugged meaning it didn't work. As in, it said it boosted the potency, the tooltip reflected that it boosted the potency, but it didn't actually boost the potency. And, you know, I put out a video that got reasonably popular on that. So people knew that I was the guy that did that thing with that weird video, I guess. So immediately when people found this Radiant Aegis jank, it was shared with me. But I came to the conclusion that while it was a bug that you could abuse to use Radiant Aegis more than you were supposed to, it didn't really do that much. Like, essentially what it did was that it allowed you to, every time Kabi was on the field and you had a summon ready to go, if you timed it just right, you could get a Radiant Aegis for free. I don't think that changes much. Like, in a Savage Raid context, if your summoner, just every time there's a raid wide, they have Tempera Coat. Just Coat, not Grasa. Just for themselves, no one else. And they have it every time that there's a raid wide. Does that, like, would that mean that Summoner's broken OP now? Or what? Does that make it good now? Because I don't think it's something that would actually matter. Hey Falca, hope you're doing well. Now, see, Agent Monica is in the chat, right? Amazing people on the internet today. And don't worry about it, Answer. They've already been hidden. Dan? Now that's an old meme, Gazel. So, Agent Monaco went through the trouble of defeating Red Fraud and Blue, which is one of the harder fights in Mass Carnival, I believe. and wanted to share it with the team. I'll say Momoka, hope you're doing well. So let's check it. Yeah, I know that one. So what's been said here, it's right behind the chat. So let me just explain. Note about my hotbar. While I do have Angel Whisper, which is Blue's Res on there, it's not on in my active spells. It's just there in a spare slot. Which totally get that one. I have certain Blue Mage spells where, like, when I don't have them active, I'll just leave the turned off button there because I don't feel like moving it. Oh, something to interrupt. And we have Breath of Magic going. And we have our Mortal Flame. Oh, that's smart. Because, so, that's a little bit of a quote-unquote Mythbusters callback. I assume that that's like a known thing for this specific fight. But Apocalypsis being a channeled attacks, if you just hold your ground, doesn't count as doing something. So you get Pyretic, it punishes you for each action you do. But Apocalypsis isn't an action. Like, once it's already cast, it doesn't matter. The game doesn't care. You're not doing anything, so you're not getting punished. And yet it works with the Suzaku spell, too. Does Pyretic punish you for canceling a channel? I don't think so. But I haven't tested. Oh, Flare Star. Has it cast 6 Fire Force? I didn't count. Oh boy. Oh, that could have been really, really dire if there wasn't a safe spot near you. It's pretty interesting that that one doesn't have like the classic spiky tether to indicate you're supposed to run away. They just make sure you have to, like, they are just like, well, you're supposed to know that. Nice. Throttle? Not cleansed, it will instantly kill you when the time runs out. Oh. Right, the first boss automatically requires that you bring Flying Sardine. And the second boss requires that you have Exuviation. Hey Silva, hope you're doing well. Uh-oh. It didn't get knockbacked. Thankfully, it doesn't put a dot on you. It just hurts you to be out of the ring. I would also add that the amount of damage those splashes do mean that you would have died immediately from like 2 of them. 1 or 2 of them without Diamond back. Fluid Ball. So an additional positive of being a healer mimicry for this is that Exuviation actually heals for a relevant amount, just on top of what else it does. Nice. That looks a lot harder, yeah. A lot of protein wave to deal with. Nice. Hey Shaq, hope you're doing well. Yeah, nicely done. I also typically use tank mimicry for soloing stuff. I've talked about this briefly in the past, that it's really interesting how for Blue Mage soloing stuff, there's like 2 camps, and they're both right for the most part. In that healer mimicry means that, of course, you can heal way more, so you can like overcome all that damage that you're going to be taking. But if you go tank mimicry, you'll take way less damage, meaning you don't have to heal as much. The thing is, a lot of it also comes down to preference. So if you're used to handling the extra damage and just healing yourself more and dealing with the, you know, with that, then healer mimicry is best for you. If you prefer taking less damage, then you can heal yourself up with White Wind instead. The key is that you might be thinking, because I don't have to heal myself as often, I get to attack more. Not really, because White Wind is very expensive. So you end up needing to use Blood Drain and stuff like that more frequently. That basically does nothing damage-wise. So it doesn't really do that much. It's just whether you want the GZDs to be wasted on healing more or recovering more. When was Blue Mage added? It was added in a very late Stormblood patch with a max level of 50. Yazel says a random question, but it's a meteor phase, one of those so-called body check mechanics on of Sveen Extreme. Yes, you could say that. It's more like maybe a slightly soft body check, because there are ways, like it doesn't check you just once, I would say, which means that there are cases where you can possibly survive with people not being alive, but I'm pretty sure that it goes in the body check box, yes. By the way, Naomi, what was it you meant about Dan? Imagine if you learned to perfectly spin things just to do stuff on DPS mimicry. Yeah, you could do that. The problem there is, of course, that Blue Mage doesn't really have... basically, let me put it like this, Yannick. Can you do that while playing... while having a 1.5 second cast time on everything? Some Blue Mage spells have a 2 second cast time, some spells have a 1 second cast time, some have a 1.5 second cast time. But let's just say that you have to spin the mob permanently while casting 1.5 second casts. I don't think you can. Urkao says I mentioned it in in-game chat, but I find it quite funny how Ninja speed boost also applies to their walk speed. Yeah. Peloton and Sprint also does that. Falca says, what does body check mean? Nearly everyone needs to be alive to survive. Generally, a body check means a boss mechanic that goes, alright, this thing is gonna hit 8 players. And if anyone's missing, you die. With very little wiggle room. And that's typically how a body check works. It's basically like a gateway checking whether you have everyone on their 2 feet. Because the mechanic is unbeatable without everyone. In the bottom right corner of your start bar, it shows like keyboard language setting, and it just said Dan. Right, yeah, for Danish. Right. Yeah, that is essentially what a body check is. But some, like these kind of shorthands, it's of good luck with Uwu. These kinds of shorthands for mechanics are like they have some flexibility, because we are trying to specify something that is not super specific. Like the funniest example of this is how everything can be a limit cut. If you don't know what a limit cut is, the rough explanation of it is, if the boss puts number counters over everyone's head and then dashes at each player in numbered order in some form or another, that's a limit cut. And it's named after the mechanic specifically named limit cut from Cruise Chaser. Hilariously, the first commonly seen version of this mechanic is, I think it's called Swift Liberation from Ravana Extreme. But it just didn't matter nearly as much, so it didn't really, you know, take hold in a raider lingo. Hence why people call it limit cut. And there's a wide range of what bosses have limit cuts. For instance, there is a boss in Holminster Switch that has limit cut. Technically, by that description I gave. Usually limit cut requires that it goes from 1 to 8, or at least 2 times 1 to 4, but it's a very flexible term, similar to how body check can be a little flexible. Like sometimes you can consider it a body check, even though it is technically survivable through shenanigans with 6 or 7 players and things like that. For instance, Zurvan has what I would call a body check on extreme, but you can survive it with 7 if you tank LB. Yeah, exactly, Momoka. Before Dynamo and Chariot, we had Ram's voice and Dragon's voice. And it usually comes down to which mechanic was it where it actually really mattered. Like, when was the first time it was a problem type mechanic? Ilias here! Our potato formation is building. Which voice is ice and which one is thunder again? Dragon's voice is thunder. Ram's voice is ice. I mean, we have a clip of something funny that happened when we were proccing M9S from Shax, and Shaq is already here. So what happened is Sip died. Sip was the off tank. Sip rest again, but wasn't second in aggro by the time the tank buster came, which means whoever is second in aggro gets targeted instead. At this point in the fight, the tank busters, as some of you may know from M9N, are mega huge. Like, they're gigantic. So Shaq gets it. Shaq has to run to Narnia to make sure other people don't die. What happens is... First we have the kicks. This was not the clear, by the way. Here we have it. You may notice that I'm chasing Shaq rather than running away. So what I'm doing in this moment is it occurred to me that I could just use cover and hallowed ground, and then maybe we both live. The problem is that I'm so caught up in this that I forget that I also have to run to Narnia. So somehow I managed to set up cover. It sticks just long enough that the damage gets redirected to me. I take the hit, but Cat and Sip were in melee range and I was too close to the boss. Yeah, just paladin things. Just paladin things. I traded 1 life for 2. But I guess in a way... it was also a little bit of a test, because I wasn't even sure if it was gonna work in the first place. And testing whether I could use cover like that when we weren't going to make it anyway was probably worth it. A test of your reflexes. Right. You see, the thing is, Momoka, I feel like you're perfectly capable of doing all those things, whether you're main tank or off tank. Like, me being the main tank, how did that prevent me from doing that? The boss was standing still for that mechanic anyway. There's actually also a counterpoint that if you start to use all of your weird shenanigans, like using Clemency, being actively taking some auto attacks while you use Clemency on others means you get extra heal value for free. So there could be a justification why it makes even more sense to put the Paladin as the main tank as a result. You also have all the blocking. I'm of the opinion more that all the tanks can go either way. You just have to play to their strengths and weaknesses. It's more brain power to put into party defense. Well, I mean, that just means it's a skill issue. Right? The skill issue needing the cover in the first place too. Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm just reiterating, the reason why the cover example doesn't work that well is because that whole thing is equally easy or hard, depending on how you look at it, whether you were the main or the off tank. In fact, if I was the off tank, it's possible I would have been the one dead. The only reason why I have a really easy time in that whole mechanic with Vamp Stomp is because our specific strategy means that I resolve my bats really fast. Paladin Spirits within damage being based on Paladin HP was an interesting choice. Yeah. Requiescent being based on MP amounts was also interesting once upon a time. And that's fair, Momoka. I'm just thinking, like, I haven't had any major issues. You do the same as I do as tank and just pop your bat instantly. As main tank, yes, that's the strategy we use. Because then I can more easily stand more still with the boss. And I do believe what killed Sip was that he ran in, got a magic wall and resolved his bat. Something like that. And as it turns out, at that specific point in the fight, if a tank dies, then it's a chain reaction. Because the tank buster will then land on someone else. And because of how late in the fight it was, I'm pretty sure it will always be the big tank buster. So it's very likely whoever it is, if they're not really awake, will take multiple players with them. Based on my own clip review, Raquel, the melee death is unrelated to tank resolving first. It's just the melees have to be careful they're not too close right when it starts. But that'll make sense in a little bit. I have a clip, as I mentioned at the start of the stream, I have a clip specifically where we have both healer, tank, and melee DPS POVs. The only way where it could cause problems is if you're slow to resolve. How do you toggle walking? On keyboard, you press the slash next to numlock. I'll say KH fan. Hope you're doing well. But yeah, what I've noticed reviewing footage is that the thing that gets the melees is typically the center bats spawn in a somewhat random position. And for the melees to resolve their bats at the intended time, you could say, they have to position themselves quite carefully. Where the position they need to stand in depends on the starting position of the bats. And the thing that can cause trouble with that is that the tanks generally resolve their bats irregardless of how the bats spawn. Which means that there are specific starting positions for the bats that can make it harder for melee to resolve theirs. And by extension, if the second tank to resolve doesn't consider that, that can then cause some trouble. But it also depends on where and when everyone resolves their bat. And that will probably make a lot more sense because our specific clear has an example of that janky configuration. Essentially, to explain it, one of the potential configurations on the bat spawning is that the main tank is, of course, usually, straight north from the boss and will run into the boss to resolve theirs. The off tank is likely to be straight south from the boss, and you put the melees on the west and east. However, the exact starting location of the center bats is where the safe spots will be when these bats explode, because they will be able to spin approximately a fourth around the arena before they get hit by the vamp stomp, which means that it's not exactly their location. It makes like an 8 shape, and the squeeze in there is approximately where the bats start. So if the bats stick north, straight north and straight south, then the safe spot where it's easier for the melees to get to resolve their bat is straight north and straight south. Which means the off tank, if they don't consider this, will be standing, ready to jump at the wall to resolve theirs so they can get back into melee range and do some damage straight south, while one of the melees will be diving for cover, getting to straight south to resolve their bats quickly, because they have to get it done before the off tank comes around. And if that melee doesn't manage, then combat roll out of the way before the tank comes in, then the tank resolving theirs, while the tank might wait the 2 seconds to wait out the magic vuln on the DPS, the tank's pop will do damage to the DPS. And the resolution of the bats actually hurts a lot on everyone involved. So if you can help it, you would rather not get hit by 2 bats. And the reason why this particular configuration matters so much is because if the bats are basically anywhere else, then the melee DPS that ends up sometimes resolving their bat in the south region, like the southeast region typically I'd say, will be proportionally further away from where the off tank will choose to resolve theirs. And the reason why the off tank just gets to choose is because due to the way this sequence of resolving, at least the way we do it, is done, the main tank does it immediately, so theirs is done before any, like, spinning bats get to do anything. The melees come in, and the earliest they can typically get into position is at the same time as the first, like, spinny bats explode on their own. Which means that the off-tank who's waiting their turn will be waiting until after that. So the off-tank is likely to resolve their bats after the first wave of spinny bats, but before the second. And that's just tight enough that if whoever ends up near the off-tank isn't ready for that, they'll get hit by, like, their own explosion. 2 seconds later, they'll get hit by the tank's explosion. And if healers don't see that coming, someone's gonna die. Like, I learned very quickly, for a similar reason, to use Holy Sheltron when available for resolving my Vamp Stomp, because sometimes a melee would resolve theirs on me. And that's not me saying, and they planned poorly. It's just, that's sometimes just how the cookie crumbles. And I have the mitigation to just deal with it. They don't. So there could be something to some justification to say if the tanks just get theirs resolved quickly, they can just mitigate when the DPS come in. The problem is that if both of the DPS mitigate, like, resolve theirs simultaneously, and the tanks get hit, everyone dies. So it doesn't work that well. That's kind of the reason why the end result is one tank does it. Omoka says, in the party finder I found that everyone resolves their stomp directly in their cardinal direction and not adjusting as much as possible. Keeps it simpler and more consistent if less damage. That's a good point, and that is also that, you know, that might be a strategy we might want to to consider. Because if those cardinal positions are, or cardinal intercardinal positions are far enough apart, then you just won't have any problems. But that is, of course, always very easy for the paladin to suggest. No, I'll just wait over here. I'll just cast Holy Spirit until it's my turn. What do you mean, monk? What do you mean that you can't do anything while you're waiting? That sounds like a you problem. Are you out of coils, Viper? That's a shame. Should have thought about that, I guess. I guess that's just going to be commonly an issue in... Also that cat. I don't care, the boss will come to me. That's going to be a typical problem when it at least comes to me deciding on strategies for the party. Is that I would probably not try to force melees to do something that causes them to lose a huge amount of uptime if there is another way. Especially not if the lose out of uptime happens to be conveniently structured such that I don't lose any uptime. It feels very inconsiderate to do it like that. Yeah, that would be a way to make it more consistent. Considering how the DPS check on M9S is not that strict. Sacrificing a significant amount of damage to just be sure no one dies might be worth it. In Party Finder, consistency is far more important than getting that extra bit of uptime. I mean, in Savage raiding, for the most part, consistency is far more important than getting that bit of extra uptime. The only time where you would sacrifice consistency for extra uptime is if you've already determined that that uptime is actually required. It's Anoki, hope you're doing well. Says, what is the logic of having 2 melee DPS? Can't we have 2 ranged physical and not worry about uptime at all? There's a few reasons, Sanoki. The first reason is Party Bonus is a feature in Final Fantasy XIV that makes it so that for each role you have represented in your party, your entire party gets plus 1% more HP and damage, essentially. I'll say champion, hope you're doing well. I think it's been a bit. So you would want to always have at least 1 melee DPS just for that. Just defensively and offensively speaking, it's going to make everyone do more damage. You'd really want that. The second reason is that, for some reason, ranged physicals are balanced such that they do a substantial amount less damage than some mages and most melees. So a 2 ranged physical comp is generally not considered super great. By comparison to one that has either 2 melees or 2 casters. But that would be something you could do. You could have a party comp where you have 1 melee, 2 mages, and a ranged physical. We had that in the last raid tier. We could have had that in this one too. It just happens that there wasn't so many that wanted that. Those ranged physical deal less damage because they have full uptime. That's a really complicated conversation, Tanuki. It's basically just janky balancing. Some call it the ranged tax. But basically, if a fight doesn't have an extremely tight DPS check, like M9S, you could probably have 2 ranged physicals. But if the fight has a more strict DPS check, I've been told M11S has a really strict one, then it would be really unwise to pack 2 ranged physicals. And that's pretty much it. There's also like other angles to it. For instance, some fights straight up don't offer as much of a disadvantage to being melee, and melees have feint. If you have 2 mages, you have 2 addle. But if the boss is very physically leaning, then having 2 feints would be better. It's just complicated, but for the most part, because some mages are within doing the same damage as melees, you could do that. For instance, Black Mage and Pictomancer typically do around the same damage as melee DPS. Hey Noodles, hope you're doing well. And that one, Tanuki, is also complicated. The reason why I'm saying some call it range tax is because considering who's affected and who's not, that's not what's happening. It's just weird balancing. As far as I know, the only mage at present that is in a damage is at a disadvantage so severe on damage output that it could be considered a problem to have that instead of a melee is, I think, Summoner. But I would also reiterate that sometimes we get a little bit too caught up in the whole, like, damage numbers of things. My personal preference is one of each, and then the fourth DPS can be a mage or a melee. Hey Liddy, hope you're doing well as well. My numbers. My damage. We need 2 ranged physicals so we can buff more people so that my damage can be bigger. Now that's the Giga Brain. We need party comps with Bard and Dancer. So that my damage can be bigger. Now that's amazing. now we're cooking. Now we're getting somewhere. Yeah, for most parties, if everyone is bringing it, you're probably fine. Like, it's only like possibly like week 1 where numbers might be so tight that you really don't want to have 2 ranged physicals. But the average party will probably have enough gear that the reason you're not making a DPS check is probably not, you're missing, you have 2 ranged physicals. But it kind of depends. Sometimes the bosses actually do have really hard DPS checks. And that can be hard to know for certain. The reason why my team, we don't really want to have double ranged physical is exactly because in my party we are more likely to have problems with DPS checks, if that makes sense. It's just, it's just a practice thing. It's just, range of skill. It's perfectly fine. But there's no reason to make it harder for ourselves than it has to be. And that's also true, as Noodle says. 2 ranged physicals gives 2 of the huge mids that the ranged physicals bring to the table. Like, nice, sweet, cool 15% mid on a 90-second cooldown. Addle and Feint. Stonks in shambles. It's like, if you don't know what to expect, having an extra one of these is not bad. It's not bad. It's just, the classic when we talk about optimization in parties, that it's usually damage we care about, right? It's usually damage output we care about. Because we can kill the boss slightly faster. My stonks. But speaking of clips, we do in fact have so I put this together separately. So I received, as some of you may know, I typically receive a few of my raid team's clears in a clip. And this time around, I thought it was funny that I got 2 of them, like, boom, right, one after the other. So on this screen, we have Shaq in the top left, Milo in the top right. On Scholar, Shaq is Viper. And then me in the bottom. It is my sound that we're using. I believe I heard from the 2 that, like, one of them has, like, weirdly loud personal volume. The other one has, like, might be missing voiceover and stuff. So I have all of the sound. So I'll just take mine. And I've specifically set it up so they all play in perfect sync, which was not that hard because the pull timer is pretty solid for synchronizing. And what's going to be interesting is how various mechanics are dealt with differently from different positions. Let me just at least turn off the music here so that it doesn't so we don't have double music. Double music. And also because we have 3 clips, there's a convenient little safe space for the chat down here and a space for me down here. And then there's like, there's this dingus. Who's not even looking at the game.
Will you cry out in pleasure or pain?
Feast your eyes on the
We have a raid wide, and Milo had already set up a recitation spread low.
challenger fall prey to the cruel mistress.
Yeah, he did, Tanuki. This is the clip of me doing so.
Come, my pets.
So you can see here, I actually talked about this a little earlier, that there is a specific configuration where it can get really in the way, depending on where the bats are. This is not that. Did we not start the fight with Expedient? Why would we do that? We actually ran into the funny thing that, so recitation spread low before combat is free. If you use it in the middle of combat, it's not quite as free. And we ran into quite quickly that the healers said that we had too much mitigation in the opener. So I can't see why we would have Expedient there. Remember, we have a white mage. So this is not the bad configuration. The bats in here, there's one right in front, right on top of Shack here. That one should resolve 90 degrees later, so it should resolve in the north-south, which means that exactly where Shack already is should be where Shack probably will resolve their bats. On the first boss of Dunscaith, is the doom you can potentially get hit by is tunable. That is, I believe that is the way you get rid of it, Vibes. That is the way you get rid of it. You see, I go in, resolve immediately. The bats have turned a 90-degree angle. I moved that same 90-degree angle. The bats explode. Naomi is here with me. Shack explodes on the other side. Yeah, exactly, Vibes. That does happen. And then you can see, let's see, Sip over here resolves theirs a little further away. And then we have the ranged exploding, like, out of Narnia. 30 miles away. Was that? Let me just check here. We have a consultation.
This is my show. I will hear you scream.
A wicked weapon. Van Patel's poised to execute it.
Looks like the 3 first cleansers can move north to make room for Sip. That is a good point, Back. The thing is, Vibes, Dunscaith isn't ran super frequently, so a lot of people just don't know how it works. So they don't even realize that dooms have been passed out.
Front.
Oh, and here we have a thing. Up on Shack's screen here. Death. Right there.
The challenger has nowhere left to run.
Left in, right in. Right out, left in.
The saw mechanic doesn't seem too different than normal. The difference is that for the first 2 bits, Vamp Fatale is doing front and back cleaves simultaneously with everything else, which doesn't happen on normal. But other than that, it's the same, yeah. It's just a tighter DPS check.
Just the beginning. My faithful minions, give me your ether.
It's begun. She's draining the audience.
Just double checking something.
This is just the beginning. My faithful minions, give me your ether.
It's begun. She's draining the audience.
The real hard mode is seeing which GCD Milo does something. That's another consultation.
All of you will feed me.
I would say, just a random tip, I know Milo said he would probably watch the VOD later. I would say, if you're using Consultation for healing, that's of course fair enough. But if you're using it for, and we have static position ether letting, if you're using Consultation for the healing, that's of course fine. But if you're using it just for the barrier reason, then it might be better to, whoops, just use Adlo spread, like Adlo deploy, because it'll be a bigger shield. Also, just a little side bit to the ether letting. I'll just let it run a little bit faster here. So there is some room. You don't have to be perfect, but something that is a little spooky is how Shaq seemed to hesitate a little bit. I think that's perfectly safe enough, but we have had trouble with ether letting crosses being a little too close, and then we have to like freestyle botch it. Which is why I basically hug the edge of the arena for it, to not even risk it, because you can see how crazy close these lasers become. Small. Because this entire fight feels awful in Gunbreaker. Yes. I feel like Sip said something similar, that it's really awkward. Here we have Vamp Stomp again at a slightly funny angle. That's what Sprint is for. Exactly. The trick is to sprint and not hesitate. Small.
Impressive footwork on display today.
I think the one place I remember expedient being used, and I only remember as in the tank position if it was used for movement, is if during the coffee maker, we call it coffee maker here because it's funnier. If it is far right then far left, or far left then far right, then Milo sometimes uses expedient for that to be sure everyone is sprinting, because sometimes people will just, you know, do a light jog and then be surprised that they couldn't make it. How's it, Lisa? Hope you're doing well.
Go out, go out.
A thing that I also noticed when we were proccing this is that what made this bit really hard didn't actually have very much to do with like the flails and the doornails themselves. The thing that usually got us in this phase, when I like really looked closer at the finer details, was if Van Fatale had a lot more stacks than she's supposed to, then she does a lot more damage than she's supposed to. And that both means the killer voice, the sadistic screech at the end, but it also means the auto attacks on the main tank. It's crazy. If she has like 9 or 10 stacks when you go into that bit, it's way harder. Just because she does more like regular damage. Which then makes it more difficult to actually do the mechanics, because you're like, oh, I'm dying! Oh, I'm dying! And yeah, the saws moving around was also a big pain point. But it was definitely all like the killer voices, like really pumping the healers was rough. Oh yeah, something funny we noticed is that it seems like these routes have different HP amounts depending on who's being caught. Stack. Which, I believe the funniest bit to that is that, let's see if Cat did it on this one. Just a quick rewind here. And take note of Cat, who's over there. There, CD. Stack. Kaboom! Stack. Just one hit. White mage things. Nice, Momoka. Misa says in my group we eventually just had our physical range call outside or inside. That was also what you might have heard in the voice over here. I think Cat sometimes mentioned it, sometimes others mentioned it. And it worked a lot better than not saying anything. Do you just let it drift at that point? Check mark.
Watch for...
I'm guessing it's the gunbreaker stuff.
I almost made a grave mistake.
Not now.
Oh boy.
Check mark.
Watch for mark.
I just want to really quick rewind on this one, this whole chain bats thing, because there was some some interesting smaller things that could easily be missed in protecting each other. You know, big damage, we set up some barriers because someone's gonna get hit. Might as well not risk it, assuming everyone will be safe. Everyone is fine so far.
Sure.
Oh, Naomi got hit. Do we do anything about that? There's an intervention. And some heals. Straight heals to the monk.
Not now.
Oh, Naomi's hit there. Boom, there's Heart of Corundum. Instant healing as well on top of that. The Heart of Corundum also came with a brutal shell barrier. And there's another hit.
Check mark. Watch for mark.
But they live because of Heart of Corundum. Were you guys also saving a 2-minute burst for after scratches were solved? I don't think we talked about that, so I don't think so, but I'm a paladin. I just click fight or flight.
Yeah, I'm dead.
Uh-oh.
I'm not dead somehow.
We take left.
I guess. But then
I'm
Naomi died.
surprised how me and Cat are
Big.
dead.
Big.
It's a big moon.
I go.
Oh, well, Naomi, it wasn't so much on blast on you there. It was more the, we actually pay attention and try to help each other. But it is pretty funny. In the first raid here I played Warrior, so often I had like a vague sense of when the 2-minute burst was, based on my Onslaught stacks. In the second tier, I played
Wait, no,
Black
more 2
Mage, which
minutes.
meant that I generally had no idea exactly when the 2-minute burst was taking place. I would just sometimes see buffs and go, oh, nice.
Now it's just pummeling.
In this raid tier, I'm playing Paladin, which means I have no idea when the 2-minute burst is taking place.
You can LB
Whenever
when it makes
you feel like
sense.
It's still not enough. I will take everything you have.
Theoretically,
Now we
this
have the
should
limit
be
break.
Yeah, too late for that.
They were in
Give it
a
everything
burst
you have.
thingy.
Everything you have.
The exhausted raid leader asking for people to bring it.
Nice.
Of
Well done.
course, we clear on a pro
Nice.
where I play mediocre. Best.
Lex,
Light God says, wouldn't it just be every second press of fight or flight? Yes, it would. and that is exactly what it would be.
See.
Now,
The real question was.
all you have to
not in
do
the
is
chat.
count 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then you do that while you're also calling out mechanics.
Let's see. At
And
the
mechanics going wrong and having to deal with moving out of melee range and doing all of the various things. Yeah, exactly, Noodles. You just have to count to 2. What? You know I'm a mathematician. I'm terrible at counting. So, yeah, it is every second one. But it's a lot easier to do that if you have a cooldown that is, like, actively showing. Yeah, I also like how they're, like, mirrored. But yeah, that is how you would keep track of it. See, the thing is, Black Mage can also easily keep track of it. If you just use Amplifier on cooldown, you have a pretty solid idea of when the 2-minute burst is coming up. The big problems come around if there's any reason at all whatsoever to delay your burst for anyone. Then you might not. And yet, ley lines is also a good one. The one where it gets really complicated for ley lines is if a boss does something that means that cooldowns are going to be drifted. And then because ley lines has 2 charges, the ley lines will just, you'll just have a stack. You'll have one. You don't know if that's because you forgot a burst or if because no one else has bursted yet. Also true, Momoka. Mana font would be a terrible marker for the 2-minute burst. Is there ever any intentional Black Mage optimization where 2 flare stars fit in burst? Optimally, I would say there is one. See, the way the length of a burst, yeah, 2 target is 1. I was thinking of a different one. If we're talking single target, then to produce a flare star, you would need to cast Fire 4 6 times, which for like slow Black Mage takes like at least 12 seconds in ley lines. And then, you also have to cast Flare Star, and if there's 2 Flare Stars, then of course means that your burst starts with Flare Star, presumably Despair, Mana Font, and then Fire Force into Flare Star. And that means that you have like 1 or 2 GCDs to spare if you do all that. And those GCDs are probably going to... Like, let's just say that if we're talking about optimizing a 2-minute burst, let's just say you'd probably have 3, at least 3 Xenoglossies in that burst. And 2 Xenoglossies is worth not having a Flare Star. And then High Thunder does enough damage that if you can reapply that during the buffs, that would beat a Fire 4, which means that as you like push Fire 4s out of the sequence to make space for more important stuff, the only way to fit 2 Flare Stars in an optimized burst is if the second Flare Star comes as a result of you going some number of Fire 4s followed by 1 to 2 flares into Flare Star. And that specific sequence would work and would probably be considered if that second Flare Star means the boss is dead. Or there is an intermission coming at that very moment, which means that your next GCD afterwards is going to be like transpose, Umbral Soul, Umbral Soul, Umbral Soul. So you're just trying to finish that Astral Fire state. But that would mean that the fight, or whatever you're doing, is the burst comes up 20 seconds before the fight ends, or before the boss becomes untargetable, and it plays out so perfectly that you can, do your 3 Xenoglosses, you can do your Flare Star, you can do your Despair, you can Mana Font, and then have time to at least do 2 Flares and a Flare Star. And then all you need to figure out is how much stuff can you put before that? That, I believe, would be it. Exactly, Noodles. That was what I was thinking of. When we were progging, and also just doing M5S reclears, I recall when my rotation went reasonably right throughout the whole fight, I would usually finish the fight with Flare, Flare, Flare Star. Like on the very last. So that can happen. And I think sometimes it would actually like Fire 4, Flare, Flare, Flare Star. And, that's better than just going straight to Flare Star, because what are you going to do after the Flare Star? You don't have any MP left. So you just sneak in as many Fire 4s as you can, and then round it off, finish. But yeah, the thing is, I would say, and that's of course that's not optimizing for maximum damage, but it's optimizing for the fact that you're probably not going to be perfect, is when I'm progging a fight as Black Mage, I will typically prioritize using the Xenoglosses as essentially like blanks, because sometimes a mechanic plays out in a way where you need an extra instant. It's a very, very nice option to have whenever you suddenly realize you didn't position right. And I'd usually prioritize that functionality over just going, oh, I have raid buffs. But then again, the way that my team has procced, we have never ran into a situation where that was what made the difference. It was usually something else that made the difference, by which I mean someone died. That someone was sometimes me. But it is a way you can optimize, and it is definitely something worth considering when you're optimizing a battle from the perspective of Black Mage, is how many Xenoglosses do you actually need for mobility? If the answer's 0, it could well be 0, then you can sneak 3 Xenoglosses into raid buffs. At least 3. The reason why I keep saying at least 3 is because if raid buffs drift enough, then you can fit 4. And if the raid buffs drift enough and something happens with your amplifier that causes it to drift too, sometimes something magical happens and you can fit 5. And the reason why it kinda becomes 3, 4, or 5 is that if raid buffs have come out exactly on time, the whole fight, then you will go into the burst with 3 polyglots, and I would say like about 1 or 2 GCDs after raid buffs end, you get your 4th. And amplifier you will usually use on cooldown. So if you use it like straight, like off rip, just BAM! Then amplifier will be ready a couple GCDs before raid buffs. But there's nothing, technically there's nothing preventing you from just not using amplifier and just holding it to use a 4th. So you could absolutely do that. The key is knowing whether that drift is going to cost you a Xenoglossy later. But yeah, specifically, the amplifier one is something you're in control of. The generated one essentially requires that your raid drifts their raid buffs by like 2 GCDs, at least. And then it's still gonna be tight. But it could happen, it could work. And yes, also as Metricon says, and this is the reason why I said I don't usually focus on like maximizing Xenoglossy value in raid buffs, is Xenoglossy's potency is high, but let's just say that Xenoglossy's potency is less than 2 times Fire 4. So if you lose a GCD because you have to reposition and you don't have anything, then the value you gained from sneaking a Xenoglossy that you maybe didn't have to lose into raid buffs is going to be less of a gain than the gain from sneaking that Xenoglossy into buffs is going to be less than the loss of not getting a GCD at any point. So it is something where you'd have to go, well, I consistently have 2 polyglots during this burst, and I don't end up needing them. But there's a lot to Black Mage optimization that it's a lot more subtle than what it used to be, I suppose, but it's still there. This isn't Yoshiranru. That's true. Although there is something funny to be said that the Flare Star, when you account for Maim and Mend, Astral Fire, and Enochian, Flare Star's converted potency from all those multipliers is like 1486 or something like that. It sounds a lot scarier than it is, because the attacks that actually have that kind of potency is before modifiers. Like Phantom Rush is like 1500, and then you have Riddle of Fire and Brotherhood. And Yoshiranryu has they add a we have Maim and Mend at home, just, and then they also have Trick Attack, well, Kunai's Bane, and Dokumori and other raid buffs, like they go crazy. What is the highest potency on a single button in the game? Literally stated on the button, I believe that's, I think that's Phantom Rush. It's either Phantom Rush or Yoshiranryu. I do believe it's Phantom Rush, 1500. I don't think there's anything that beats that. Like, damage literally printed on the thing. However, I'm just double checking. Because there are a lot of big ones that could be competing. How about Seraph Strike? We're talking about PvE, Gazel. About including traits. Not things like Trick or Dokomori. The reason why I usually include something like Trick Attack is because Ninja would never use Yosoranryu without Kunai's Bane. Check Summoner's Exodus. Also 1500. A key difference between Exodus and Phantom Rush is that Exodus is subject to pet potency. So it's a fake 1500. It's closer to 1000 and 1250, I think. The question is, do you count Blue Mage or not? Fun fact, near the end of Endwalker, I actually made a video about the single biggest hit you can do without making use of things like Boja. And the biggest single hit you could do at the end of Endwalker, in like just against the striking dummy, it was allowed. The allowed adjustments was you could bring a full party. There was also like a slight adjustment that was briefly considered that technically you could bring an alliance raid. That way you could have a ninja in another party and a rogue in another party. But that was mostly like, that just detracted from ninja. That was not really fair, right? So I generally focused on a full party context. And ninja was the strongest if Blue Mage wasn't counted because of Yosoranryu. If Blue Mage was allowed, then Final Sting with Whistle and Moon Flute and Off Guard and the correct condensed Libra. I don't know if I counted that one, but I could count that one. Like basically, if you stacked all the damage buffs that Blue Mage has, and then you grabbed like 7 normal jobs to just prop it up more, it was not even close. I remember correctly, Blue Mage's biggest hit was twice whatever Ninja could produce, with a 10 level difference. And the converted potency, which is how I usually count it, because it's a lot easier to figure out how much 100 potency is worth, and then just going, well, from that we know that 4,500 potency is worth that much. It looked insane because of how many things they could just like stack on top of each other. But yeah, if we're only counting passives, to your question, Rakav, then, well, Black Mage loses by default because even with everything they have, they're like 15 potency short of beating Phantom Rush. So that that's like the gatekeeper. You have to be able to beat Monk's Phantom Rush because Monk does not have any passive damage boosts. And I do believe that it starts the return of White Mage, the return of the surprise prince of damage. In Endwalker, like late Endwalker, I do believe the top 3 was like... I do believe it was Blue Mage, Ninja, White Mage because of Aflato's Misery. And Aflato's Misery is 1,400 plus 30%. Which would be 1,820. Didn't Prefulgence get increased to a bigger number? Yes, it did. Let's see. Not big enough. Don't you also have to count Caetsu for Ninja? No, I should, Snow Shiro, but I think Rakout was asking, like, was going, yeah, I know, but I'm just curious. But yeah, if you count Caetsu, then Ninja would still not make it, because Hyoshiranryu is 1,300, and then Caetsu is basically, we have Maim and Mend at home. It's the same 30% that White Mage has, but White Mage starts at a higher potency. The reason why Hyoshiranryu wins in the grand contest of everything is because Ninja has a 10% damage bonus from Kunai's Bane, and then they also bring a raid buff. White Mage doesn't have that, and they don't bring a raid buff. Monk has a 15% bonus and brings a raid buff of their own. But because they don't have a 30% bonus and only a 15% bonus, while Ninja has a 30 and 10, that's why Phantom Rush falls a bit short. And the reason why it matters that Ninja and Monk brings a raid buff is because since we're trying to make a realistic comparison, the 7 other players will of course be, no one's going to be Reaper, because 3%. You just grab as many high damage bonuses as you can, so you're like, you obviously grab Astrologian for the 6% and the card. And you, well actually nowadays you could do even more, because you could have Divination and both the Spear and the Balance, because they actually stack. You just don't really want to do that, because the multiplicative factor of stacking them is going to be less valuable than having like the full bonus on both cards by putting them on appropriate players. But the thing is, once you count all these, the 7 party members helping you, all they do in the contest is they add the proportional difference that it makes whether player 8, yourself, bring a raid buff. Because if we didn't count the 7 other players, I mean, the 7 other players introduce the same damage bonus for everyone. It's just that in some cases, sometimes it could matter. I don't think it does anymore. I think there's also that, like, the angle of, well, 2 of the jobs would have to be tanks and things like that, but that also flew out the window in the context of trying to find the biggest possible number you could produce. But yeah, also in the context of the biggest possible number you could produce, there are 2 other things you can do, but they're kind of cheating. The first one is just do the test unsynced, so you have a 300% stat bonus. The second thing, which kind of like also throws everything out the window, is what if you went to Boja? Because Boja has some insane damage bonuses you can stack, which I believe in Boja a White Mage can slap an Afflatus Misery for like 10 million damage. But the key is, the whole key to the conversation was, the trick, the damage you can do has to be reproducible anywhere. Assuming each party member is present, it has to be reproducible anywhere. Which means that you wouldn't be able to do it in Boja. And you wouldn't be able to... Well, rather, you wouldn't be able to do the thing in Boja anywhere, and you wouldn't be able to get a 300% bonus from Unsynced anywhere, because you would only be able to get it in places where you have a 300% bonus, which is not that many places. But it is funny. I will probably make a follow-up on that sometime in 7.5. But unless there's some huge potency changes happening, I'm pretty sure that the ranking now, with all-inclusive, minus Blue Mage, it'll probably be like Ninja, Monk, White Mage. With Blue Mage included, White Mage falls out of the top 3. And it is funny, because I think Phantom Rush has gotten like 200 or 300, if not 400 potency more during Dawntrail. It's absolutely insane. I remember that Phantom Rush was like, it ranked high, but when people when I was like, yeah, it's like Ninja and then White Mage and then like there's some other options, then Phantom Rush came up and I looked up Phantom Rush and was like, what happened? Like, it's absolutely crazy. I think it's not quite to that extreme, but I'd almost say that where Black Mage is a job where the average potency of their attacks is surprisingly close, Monk is possibly the one where the range is like ludicrously wide. We don't know how to buff Monk. 100 more potency to Phantom Rush. Hey, at least the Enochian thing stopped. In fact, the last time Enochian was touched, it got nerfed. Right. So. Is Nox here? Also, hey, Day Keyboard. Hope you're doing well. That was when they did the 7.2 rework, right? Yes, exactly. They nerfed Enochian from, I think, 32% to 27%. And then basically everything else was buffs, I believe. There is something to be said. I think it came up to a net 1% nerf to Black Mage, which means that they could have nerfed Enochian by just 4%. But yeah, on that note, we have one last clip, which is a huge sidetrack. Nox wanted to show a little bit more of his very favorite game, Hades 2, which is a game I have played Hades 1. And we have looked at some Hades 2 previously, but that was only one region. Or rather, the first step, like the first bit. I think there's 3/3 in a climb. And Nox wanted to show some more. It's like a 12... There's 4 regions. Well then, I thought it was 3, because as you know, rules of 3... And I don't mind checking out some more Hades 2. Maybe there's some others that would like the insight that Nox can provide in this game. But, yeah, this will probably be the last clip, and then we'll be probably rounding off. So if you're like, nah, I don't care for Hades 2. Thanks for having you. Not climb. When I climb in the ring. Let me just turn off my music here. And clip time. 12 minutes.
Hello everyone, I'm finally back after a reasonable long break to do more Hades. We are going to be running the second region, since last time we completed the first one. This is not the same run, because which means that I have a slightly different setup. I don't think it's too different.
I don't remember what you had last time.
I got Flutter Strike, but instead of the gain, I have Rapturing, which effectively does the same thing. It is a source of a curse, which is what we want. Now, this time around, in the preamble, we're going over some other minor details for meta knowledge that I kind of skipped over last time. So, in terms of this devour time, you can kind of see behind the region section that I have about 4 minutes left. That time is going to be added to the next region. So next region, you're going to get another plus 9 minutes to complete the region. So in total, it will be about 15-ish, well, 13-ish minutes to complete the entire region. And once we complete that, we'll get another 9 minutes again. So this is the reason that
I'm just gonna quiet it down a little bit. I specifically had a talk
kind of
with
irrelevant
Nox about this.
for most
It's
parts.
you know, like it's a pet peeve
Players
thing.
is-
It's a pet peeve thing is that there's a lot of people playing
There's
Hades
so
2 that are
many ways to
vehemently
solve timers.
against the timer because they feel stressed.
so
But
much
you have
extra
like,
time
if there's 4
for each
regions, you
region.
have 36 minutes to do a run, and
By
the
the end
timer
of the run,
pauses whenever you're not in combat with anything.
only have one
It's
stack
paused
of
right
time.
now. It's paused
You
when
have
you're in the menu. It's
25
paused when you're
minutes
choosing a
to
skill.
complete it.
Paused a lot of the time. So the 36 minutes is like,
If you take 25
you'll
minutes
like if you do a run over 2 or 3
to complete
hours,
the region,
that'll probably still be within the time frame,
sending
because
it
the
paid
reason
for
it took
half
2 to 3 hours is because
like,
you menued,
it takes less than that amount
for
of
like
time to
2
go from the
hours.
first zone to the
Not
next.
because you were playing for 2 hours. Like I know that like this is a classic with like
By the way,
other
Dawntrail
roguelikes
is
like that, like Slay the Spire. You could do that. Like the actual combat
This
is
a
not that
fountain,
long.
It restores health. We unfortunately haven't lost any. And this time around, we are going for Poseidon because we are looking for a duo boon, which are green boons.
A case in point.
Go over down
This
here.
run is going to be like 6 minutes or something once
see
Nox is finished
it.
explaining.
There, Island Getaway, which means we need a Flutter Strike.
Exactly,
Or
Nossereld.
Flutter Flourish. We have Flutter Strike. And we need any one of these boons from Poseidon. And once we do, we will have a bunch of damage resistance, which is what we want. Because it's a very tanky build. The reason I went for Rupturing instead of Glamour Gain this time around is because I want to get Hephaestus, because Kai commented that I was kind of mean to it. Hephaestus is good, and we do want him this time around, but if you have Glamour Gain, the reason you want Hephaestus goes out the window. Which we'll find out once we get Hephaestus and hopefully get his gain. And these are a miniature chop, which gets you this. We might as well get this. Guess it's a nice effect. Alright, let's get this going.
Into the depths.
The second region is slightly faster than the first one. It's water theme.
You can see the timer there.
And
Practicing, Skilla.
we lost our dress, which was expected. The dress gave us a damage buff, but
Those spouts again.
a stacking damage buff, but it's unfortunately gone now.
I assume it's until you get hit.
Alright, this means that the next room, so this one, is going to guaranteed have a god payout. It should. Unless I do not understand how doors work.
Unless I don't know how doors work.
Do understand how doors work. Getting Poseidon. It's nice what we want.
On the pit.
There it is.
Gift.
Dear Uncle Poseidon, this
Yeah.
A Unforged. Very nice.
Yeah, I saw the armor earlier.
And now we can collect the reward.
I assume it is difficult to get more of it.
Here we aren't getting Tidal Ring because we want our Rupture Ring.
We
Hydraulic
already
Might
have a ring.
doesn't progress our thing. But Breaker Rush does, and Breaker Rush is a alright boon.
the tides come in.
We don't want that.
Oh, the timer's taking right now,
roll up.
actually.
Alright. Very nice.
You're in my way.
That is something that I didn't really notice before, but that is something where someone could be mildly annoyed by the timer like hanging over their head, even though it doesn't really matter.
Out of my sight.
That they have to quickly go into a menu to pause
Let's
the time.
see here. All of these are actually pretty
I
decent.
think you had
Heartbreaker,
Flutter Flourish last time.
because I need to actually check. Do we still want either this, which we can't make, or we want this, which we do meet the requirement for?
Well, it is one of
so-
those you have marked.
I'm gonna roll once here.
Let's try this again.
We did not get it. I don't want to roll again. Because it costs more to roll each time. So spiritual affirmation is just fine. And more HP.
Serpents.
Ah yes, the survive with 1 HP, the classic. We love to see it. Those enemies, they don't have 245 HP, as you know. They have 246 HP was what we were looking for. Unfortunately, you didn't plan for that. See, that is a way you can overcome having to be like, oh no, I have to choose quickly. You can just pause the game.
The
can see everything you
the
need to see.
planes with 2 guns on it cannot give us a duo boon as a rule. So it is not particularly valuable to us. We do not want to damage her because she doesn't quite fit into the build we're doing right now. There isn't anything super good from Chaos. So I think I'm gonna go to the...
Nothing super good from Chaos. You could go and get Louis Soir.
Which has... Narcissus.
Laurel, or whatever her name is. I was just thinking about the time we met. I looked down into the shivering waters, and there he was.
There he was.
Oof, I know what you mean.
Sure.
Tucked away.
I have something for you.
Oh!
Go forward and see to it.
None of the choices there mattered. So I'm just taking the one that is.
Drown in it.
The choice of least bad.
The most general value. Then being able to cast your cast range is just better than not being able to. Hey,
Oh.
we got it. We got Island Getaway.
There it
Very
is.
nice.
Protect you, my
Oh, I actually forgot to mention this. We did get a hex. The problem is that Darkside is a very mediocre hex. I'll try and use it to give you an example, but it's hard to use.
By the way,
And
two and a half minutes left of the video. 2
Kinda
minutes
does
have
worse
passed
damage than just
in
regularly
the actual
attacking.
timer of the game.
The path of stars.
But it does have a synergy with Aphrodite, so we're going to go towards it at least. And now we're going to fight Scylla. We were going to see a lot more of. Well, Scylla and the Sirens, her band. The- So, the drummer is Jesse. Actually, never
And
remember.
the sirens.
Guitarist is Roxy. And then you have Sil on the
Music
vocals.
pauses because you killed the drummer.
Alright, so this is our hex. As it's eh. Makes you immune to damage, which is neat.
Well, you can at least get away with taking a lot of damage at this difficulty, it seems. Oh, never mind. Music's gone.
And there she goes.
That was 3 minutes or so.
Keep practicing.
So yeah, if you ever needed random advice from the 14
That was
guy,
it for this time around. Hope you
If you-
enjoyed. Have a good rest of the night. Or evening, or day, or whatever you are.
exactly.
Bye.
If you ever needed some evidence that the timer is not scary in Hades 2, there you go. There you go. It took 3 minutes to run a whole set like that. But that was also what I had planned on my end. We got through all the clips. We actually reached the destination that I had planned for us to reach last time. The one of the absolute furthest away from everything you can ever get on foot. The funny thing about this is that this sometimes comes up when we do these walks and talks, is how like what's the longest walk? Based on my testing, any longest walk in Final Fantasy XIV has to end here. The reason why it has to end here and can't stop here is because around here is a jump down, which means that the way out of here is down this way and then straight through, like down here. Whereas the way up, you have to go up and around. So like this whole section is lost on the way out, but on the way in, it is preserved. So pretty much any run, if you're trying to... Any run, I'm being stupid here. Any walk you can make from point A to point B, the longest possible walk you can make in Final Fantasy XIV, where you're only allowed to walk like this, has to end here. I want to walk through Kurthus, one of my favorite zones to do it through. Yeah, see, that's the thing, is that because Churning Mist has to be included, that means that Dravanian Forelands also has to be included. And let's just say this is not reachable by foot. So this doesn't matter. This is not reachable. Which basically also means that you're not going to come from Idleshire, and you're not going to come from Hinterlands, which means that because Dravanian Forelands is automatically included, Kurthus Western Highlands is automatically included. Now, I don't think the Sea of Clouds is useful, because due to how segmented it is, there isn't that much walk to be had here. So it's not going to be from here. It's probably going to be from here. And that means that you go from Foundation, and then it depends on your rules. Is airships allowed? If yes, then Foundation is going to be part of your walk, but anything from Central Highlands and beyond it might not be. If airships are not allowed, then that basically automatically means... Does that mean you could go Southern Thanalan to Sea of Clouds? How would you do that? I don't think... Can you go to the Sea of Clouds from Southern Thanalan? I don't think you can. Oh, like that, one huge walk. You could. The thing is that you'd probably rather, because the Sea of Clouds is connected to the Foundation like this, it wouldn't be a very, like, the best you could do is, like, walk to somewhere in this, like, central here if it's connected by foot. But I'm pretty sure that the path to Churning Mist is probably longer, so if you want to do a long walk, probably not. If that doesn't matter, then yeah, you could. And if you don't allow airships, then suddenly you have a lot of options. But I do believe a classic one that tends to come up is Fringes, Peaks, Locks, Garlemald, Nethergate, Mare Lamentorum, all the way up to this corner or this corner. You choose. Can you leave Thavne or Ratzatan in any way? Yes, you can. This airship landing can send you to... I do believe it can send you to Uldar and Limsa and Gridania. Wasn't the very first walk Gangos to Ultima Thule? The very first walk on April 1st was from Gangos to Mare Lamentorum, their dance party, which took less time than I had anticipated. So we then went from the dance party to Ultima Thule, if I recall correctly. But I do believe the longest walks we've done has either been, like, has actually been between those. That Gangos to Kugane takes surprisingly less time than you'd think. Part of the reason for this is that if you, like, certain walks are impossible if you don't allow airships and ships. So I typically just say ships are allowed. Thank you, Gyarados. Just default, ships are allowed. But that universally also means that the Ruby Sea is cut down to like a third, because there's a ship from the north part to the south part. So it's deceptive in its length. However, there isn't that kind of trickery from Ishgard to the Churning Mists. And that basically means that I do believe the longest paths you can take is, as I said, it has to end in the Churning Mists. Now, whether you start in Ultima Thule or Mare Lamentorum, I'm actually not 100% sure which one is the longest, but both of them, Ultima Thule will reach Old Sharlayan, which will then send you to Limsa Lominsa, and from there you can take an airship to Ishgard, and then you go to the Churning Mist from there. Mare Lamentorum, you make it to Gridania, and then you take an airship to Ishgard from there. And the funny thing is, nearly every single really long walk you can come up with, if it's actually really long, like really long, it will almost certainly pass through Limsa Lominsa. And if it doesn't, it passes through Gridania Uldar. And it just so happens that you use an airship that doesn't have to do a quick stop in Limsa. Why not just walk from Gridania to Ishgard instead of taking the airship for maximizing walk time? Because that would be cheating. To try and put it into perspective, Rakar, if you're allowed to do that, then what prevents me from just doing a squiggly path all the way through Churning Mists? Just squiggly all the way through. As long as I'm technically progressing in fact, I could just run in circles if I wanted to. Because apparently the shortest path isn't a requirement. And that's the reason. That is also why I'm saying universally, I say ships are allowed. Which means that the ships are part of the shortest path. Which means that you have to use the ship for your path, otherwise you're cheating. But you could do that if you're looking to try and make the path longer. Exactly. The longest walk with the shortest path. Because if you're just trying to make the longest walk, then there's nothing preventing you from doing that. You could just cheat. Or cheat, question mark. You could just do whatever. If you could, like, one way you could go about it is if you could find a starting point and an ending point where you're not using any airships or ships at all, then you could justifiably say this walk does not allow ships. And then you could, for instance, start somewhere way down in Gridanian, like in the Black Shroud, walk all the way to Ishgard, and then continue walking all the way to the Churning Mists. But then there's a question, because technically the way you access the Churning Mists from the Ravanian Forelands is by accessing a thing, and I'm pretty sure that the lore explanation there is that you get... either you take a teleport, or you fly on a dragon. Does that count as a ship? And you see how I mean, like how by just saying, yeah, these kinds of fast travel options that are placed in the game are allowed, is kinda there to like go, yeah, you're traveling from point A to point B. The game allows it, and you're not teleporting. Like, you're not using the teleport menu. That's what's really off. If you don't pay for it, it's okay by my book. That's an interesting way to put it. Because that means that the ship from Old Sharlayan to Limsa is allowed, but the ship from Limsa to Old Sharlayan is not, if I remember correctly. Which, of course, could also be a trick to make a very specific optimal route. It would also mean that the ship from Garlemald to the Locks and vice versa is also allowed, because that one is also free. But I mean, that's also something worth exploring. How far can you, like, how far can you get away from some starting point without spending any gil? That could also be a way to look at it. And you could make that you could very much gamify that by just going like, yeah, I put all my money on a retainer. Now let's see how far we can make it. Now the question is whether that's useful for anything. It's not really, but it would be pretty funny, wouldn't it? I believe part of the justification for why it's free to go home from Old Sharlayan, I'm not sure, but it does mean that you can always come back to the safe, to safe areas, hypothetically, because I'm pretty sure that it's not free to fly from Ishgard to Limsa. Just randomly. You would never be able to reach Lanacea. You would if you started in Sharlayan. But yeah, but you wouldn't be able to leave once you're there. Is it impossible to reach Lanosia without spending money outside of it? The only way to access Lanosia is by boat. Or airship. And both cost money. So the only way to reach it, I think, is when you get there the first time through the MSQ. They'll, just send you there. But other than that, no. Anyway, interesting to think about. Maybe we'll do a proper big long walk next time. But on that note, hey Kita-san, you caught us right at the end. I'm very sorry. But if you would like to be part of the Discord community server, there's a link right there in the chat. There you'll also find the weekly schedule where you can see what else is coming up in the coming days. I usually update it Sunday or Monday. You'll also find the announcement room with links to videos and streams when they come out. And if you grab the reminder roll in the role assignments room, you'll get a notification whenever I put out a video or a stream. As well as an extra one around 15 minutes before stream starts. You can catch it right when we go live. And if you'd like to support the channel even more directly, you can become a member, you can subscribe, you can follow, you can like, you can super chat, you can cheer, you can do all that goodness. If you don't like any of that, there's also the Ko-Fi link that I will post it right there in the chat. And it's also in the description. It all helps support me in the channel directly so I can focus on doing weird stuff like this with all of you. So thank you so much for the support. But that'll be it from me tonight. So good night, good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are in the world. And I hope to see you all very soon. Bye-bye.